The champagne glasses shimmered under the ballroom lights. As I stood in the doorway, still wearing my gray work jacket and steel-toe boots, my son Alex spotted me instantly. His smile froze mid-sentence. He leaned toward his fiancée and whispered something that made her laugh, the polite, cutting kind of laugh people use when they want you to disappear without having to ask. Then he walked over, all perfect posture and polished manners, the kind that comes with too many networking dinners. "Dad," he said softly, "please don't take this the wrong way, but we only want important people at the ceremony." The words hit harder than any fall I'd taken on a job site. 25 years of sweat of early mornings and busted knuckles, and suddenly I wasn't important. I looked at him, really looked at him, standing there in his tailored suit and shiny shoes. A man who had my eyes, but not my backbone. I nodded once. "Interesting," I said. It was the same word I used when an engineer tried to tell me something impossible. Inside, something clicked, quiet, sharp, inevitable. This wasn't over. Outside, the night air smelled of salt and champagne. I walked past rows of luxury cars, the kind that cost more than my first house, and climbed into my old Ford. The seat creaked like it was sighing with me. As I started the engine, I glanced back at the country club's glowing windows. Laughter spilled out bright and hollow. For a moment, I almost turned around. But then I remembered Laura, my late wife, telling me once, "Never raise your voice, Mike. Just build something they can't ignore." I gripped the steering wheel. She'd always been right about people, especially our son. The drive home was quiet except for the hum of the highway and the faint hiss of the radio. My phone buzzed once, a text from Alex. "Sorry if I sounded harsh. You know how Emily's family can be. We just want everything perfect." I stared at the screen until it went dark again. Perfect. That word again. I'd spent my whole life chasing precision, straight lines, solid foundations, clean circuits. But perfect people. They were crooked in ways a level couldn't measure. At home, the porch light flickered on as I pulled in. My small house sat at the edge of Riverside, the same one Alex used to call our fortress when he was little. Now it looked like a memory someone had left behind. I set my keys down, poured myself a coffee, and sat at the kitchen table. The mug was chipped, the coffee bitter. I didn't mind. I opened the drawer and pulled out a faded photo, me, Laura, and a 6-year-old Alex at a county fair. His hands were sticky with cotton candy. Mine were stained with engine grease. He'd looked up at me that day and said, "When I grow up, I want to work with you, Dad." I smiled at the memory, then exhaled. Somewhere along the way, he'd grown up exactly how I didn't want him to. I grabbed a notepad from the counter and wrote one line in block letters, Phase 1, make them see what important really means. The pen dug into the paper. I didn't feel angry. Anger's easy, it burns fast and leaves you empty. No, what I felt was colder, steadier. It was purpose. Before heading to bed, I checked my email. Sitting there was one from Julia Harper, the wedding planner, confirming final vendor schedules for next week's event. I hovered over her name for a long moment. Julia and I had crossed paths years ago. She'd handled corporate galas for one of my renewable energy projects before her firm went private. Smart woman, professional. She owed me a favor. I started drafting a reply, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. Julia, there might be a few last-minute changes to the wedding schedule. Let's meet early tomorrow at Oak Ridge Resort to discuss an alternate arrangement. MR. I reread it twice before hitting save as draft. Not yet. Timing mattered. Revenge wasn't a hammer, it was a blueprint. Every measurement had to be exact, every move deliberate. I walked to the window. Outside, the streetlights buzzed softly, feeding from power lines my crews had installed 10 years ago. Everything in this neighborhood, every house lit, Every warm kitchen ran on systems I'd built. Yet in that ballroom, surrounded by people drinking under chandeliers powered by my company's energy, I was the one dismissed as unimportant. The irony almost made me laugh. I shut the lights and stood there a while in the dark. The hum of the refrigerator filled the room steady and calm, like the sound of thought. My reflection in the glass looked older than I remembered. Lines deeper, hair thinner, but my eyes hadn't changed. They were the same eyes that had stared down storms on job sites and watched a newborn son sleep in a hospital bassinet 27 years ago. They were patient eyes. I picked up my phone again, scrolled back through old messages, birthdays, job promotions, missed calls. Then I opened the recorder app and tested the mic. My thumb hovered over the red button, just in case I muttered. Old habits die hard. I saved the file as Proof 01. Sitting back down, I finished the coffee and opened my laptop. The desktop background was a photo of the first solar farm I'd ever built, hundreds of panels gleaming under the California sun, a monument to sweat and second chances. In the corner of the photo stood a man in a hard hat, back turned to the camera. That was me. I zoomed in until his silhouette filled the screen. "They'll remember," I said quietly. "Not today, but soon." The house settled around me, wood creaking as if listening. I shut the laptop, scribbled one more note. "Remember, patience is power." Then I turned off the light. Outside, the sky above Riverside glowed faintly with the reflection of a city I'd helped build but no longer belonged to. Somewhere across town, my son was celebrating with people who measured worth by the shine of their shoes. And me, I was planning to remind them what keeps their lights on. Let me tell you how a man becomes unimportant after building everything his family stands on. People say time builds character. They're wrong. It builds calluses first. Back in 1998, I was 31, broke, and stubborn enough to think I could outwork fate. I'd just been laid off from a power company that went belly up after mismanaging contracts, and all I had left was a beat-up Ford, a degree in electrical engineering, and a wife 6 months pregnant. Laura believed in me more than any man deserves. She'd rub her belly, smile, and say, "He's going to grow up watching his dad build something real." I didn't know what real was back then, but I knew I wasn't going to let her down. With a $43,000 loan from my father-in-law and a stubborn streak that should have come with a warning label, I started Reed Electric Solutions out of a rented garage in Riverside. My first client was a friend of a friend who needed wiring done for a used car dealership. I finished it in 2 days, charged half of what it was worth, and still felt like a king. That first check, $1,200, paid our rent, bought a crib, and left just enough for a cheap bottle of wine. We drank it on the porch that night, sitting on milk crates, watching the sky turn pink. Laura said, "It's small now, Mike, but someday this will light up the world." She was right, though she never lived long enough to see it. 3 years later, she was gone. One bad curve, one late-night storm, one driver who never stopped. Alex was 3 years old. I remember standing in that hospital hallway, hands shaking, the nurse asking if there was anyone I could call. There wasn't. Just me, a toddler, and a promise. I worked days on the field and nights fixing equipment just to keep food on the table. Sometimes I'd bring Alex to job sites and set him on a toolbox with crackers and crayons while I worked. He'd laugh at the sparks, calling them tiny stars. I told him each one was a little piece of power, something you earn with your hands. Year by year, the jobs got bigger. I started installing solar panels before most people even knew what renewable energy meant. When others saw risk, I saw sunlight waiting to be caught. By 2005, Reed Electric became Reed Renewables. I hired 3 guys, then 10, then 50. My hands stayed rough, my boots stayed old, but the bank balance finally started to smooth out. Eddie, my foreman from back in the early days, used to joke, "You're the only millionaire who still brings his own lunch." I told him it kept me honest. What I didn't tell him was that I preferred the smell of wire dust to cologne and the hum of power lines to boardroom chatter. Success is quieter when you earn it. Alex grew fast, bright, curious, full of questions. When he was 7, he asked why we didn't live in one of the big houses we built panels for. I told him, because someday you'll understand why we don't need to. He nodded, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. How do you explain to a child that pride doesn't always wear a suit? I sent him to private school, paid in cash, kept the receipts in a box labeled Future. Every tuition payment was a brick in the wall I was building to protect him from the kind of struggle I'd lived through. But somewhere along the way, that wall became a barrier. By the time he hit high school, Alex had stopped inviting me to parent events. I remember one graduation ceremony when he said, "Dad, maybe wait outside, it's crowded." I did. Watched through the window while he took his diploma. The applause sounded muffled through the glass. When he went off to college on a scholarship I'd secretly supplemented, I told him to chase whatever dream he wanted. He majored in marketing, got a shiny internship, and sent fewer calls home each year. I didn't mind at first. I thought distance was part of growing up. But the gap wasn't about miles, it was about pride. In 2015, Reed Renewables merged with a clean energy investment group. We became one of the biggest private solar providers on the West Coast. I could have bought a mansion, retired early, joined country clubs. Instead, I stayed in my same 2-bedroom house, drove my same truck, wore my same work jacket. Let people think what they wanted. There's freedom in being underestimated. The truth was, I didn't hide my wealth out of shame. I hid it because I wanted Alex to see value before luxury. To know that dignity doesn't come from dollars, but from discipline. Somewhere deep down, I kept hoping he'd ask, not for money, but for meaning. But that question never came. He called less, visited less, and when he did, he looked uncomfortable in my world, too. Dusty, too small, too slow. Once over dinner, he asked Dad, "Don't you ever get tired of fixing things?" I smiled and told him, "Fixing things is what keeps me from breaking." He didn't laugh. He just checked his phone and changed the subject. Still, I kept giving. Quietly, I funded scholarships under the name Riverside Solar Foundation. I donated to children's hospitals, built community centers, powered by free panels, created jobs for guys who needed a second chance. Every project I touched made me prouder not of being rich, but of being useful. Some nights, though, when the house got too quiet, I'd pour myself a drink and stare at the photo of Laura. "I'm trying," I'd whisper. "He's just lost in a world we didn't build." Then I'd look down at my hands, calloused, scarred, strong, and remember that everything worth having comes with proof of work. By 2022, Reed Renewables had grown into a network of 11 companies across 3 states. I stopped keeping track of net worth. It didn't matter. What mattered was that we employed over 300 people, men and women who showed up early, worked hard, and went home proud. People who still believed respect had weight. But Alex didn't see any of that. To him, I was still just the guy in boots and a dusty jacket. The blue-collar dad who didn't fit into his sleek digital life. One afternoon, while reviewing a contract, I caught a glimpse of a headline online. Brightwave Communications promotes Alex Reed to Director of Marketing. The photo showed him in a tailored suit, shaking hands with executives, smiling under fluorescent lights. The caption read, "Rising star leaves blue-collar roots behind." I stared at that line for a long time. Then I laughed, not bitterly, just quietly. Because maybe he needed to leave those roots behind to realize what they held him up for. I closed the laptop, leaned back and looked at the sunlight pouring through the blinds, clean, bright, constant. Power that asked for nothing but a place to land. He thought I was small because I stayed grounded. But he didn't understand roots aren't weakness. They're the only reason trees survive the storm, and sooner or later, every storm finds you. My son used to hand me wrenches. Now he hands me excuses. 3 years before the wedding, I was tightening bolts on a solar array outside Los Angeles when my phone buzzed with a text. Got promoted today. Marketing director. Big step up, Dad. Attached was a picture of Alex in a sharp gray suit, grinning beside a company banner that read, Bright Wave Communications. I smiled until I read the caption he'd posted online, finally leaving the blue-collar life behind. The words stung sharper than the dry desert wind whipping my face. I pocketed the phone and went back to work. Nothing humbles you faster than realizing the pride you built your life around has become your child's embarrassment. When he brought Emily home for the first time, she was polite, elegant, and clearly out of my league. She came from old money, the Vaughn family owners of a chain of coastal resorts stretching from San Diego to Palm Springs. She shook my hand delicately, like she was afraid I might still have engine grease on it. So, Mr. Reed, she said, smiling thinly, Alex tells me you work in construction, I nodded. Energy, technically. We build solar systems. Oh, that's fascinating, she said, already glancing at her phone. Alex jumped in. Dad loves working with his hands. It's his thing. Her smile widened, but her eyes said it all. His thing didn't belong in her world. They started visiting less after that. Holidays turned into quick lunches. Birthdays became text messages. When Alex finally invited me to dinner at their new apartment in downtown LA, I could feel the distance before I even parked. The building had valet parking and a marble lobby. A concierge in a suit that probably cost more than my truck offered me sparkling water while I waited for the elevator. Upstairs, the place looked like something out of an architecture magazine, glass, steel, and silence. Alex introduced me to Emily's parents that night. Mr. Vaughn was polite but bored, checking his watch between bites of steak. Mrs. Vaughn smiled the way people smile at charity volunteers. Alex tells us you've done well for yourself, she said. Self-made, right? That's admirable. I do hope you'll take some time to relax now that your son's in different circles. I raised my glass. Different, sure. Not higher. The smile on her face faltered for just a second, and that second was worth the whole dinner. After they left, Alex pulled me aside. Dad, you didn't have to say that. Say what you know about circles. I didn't mean anything by it, I said, though I did. He sighed. Look, you don't have to prove anything to them. They just grew up different. I looked at him, polished, confident, fluent, in the language of people who'd never known the taste of sweat. Difference fine, I said. But don't mistake clean hands for clean hearts. Months passed and Alex climbed higher. He started traveling for work, attending galas, talking about branding and optics. When I called, he answered with that distracted tone successful people use when they've already moved on from the conversation. One evening, I invited him over for dinner. He showed up late, still in his suit, and barely touched the lasagna I'd made. Dad, he said, setting down his fork, you've done enough. Maybe it's time to sell this place, retire somewhere nice. I smiled. Some things aren't for sale. He laughed awkwardly, like I'd missed the joke. When he announced his engagement, I wanted to be happy for him. Emily seemed like the kind of woman who'd host charity luncheons, not sit in the dirt planting things. They chose Newport Beach for the ceremony, ocean view, private resort, $200,000 price tag. He sent me the link to the venue, proud of its exclusivity. It's where Emily's family always books their events, he said. It's classy. I didn't reply right away. I was too busy noticing the small logo at the bottom of the site, powered by Reed Renewables. A few weeks later, they invited me to a small dinner at the Vaughn's home. The estate was enormous, rolling lawns, a koi pond staff in matching uniforms. Inside, guests in cocktail attire mingled under chandeliers. I felt like a misplaced tool in a jewelry box. When Alex introduced me to a group of his colleagues, one of them chuckled. "Reed Renewables, I've heard of that. Any relation?" Alex hesitated. "Just a coincidence," he said, laughing it off. My chest tightened, but I said nothing. I just looked at him, the boy who once wore my hard hat, like a crown, now pretending he'd never held a wrench in his life. Later that night, I stepped outside for air. The patio overlooked the ocean, black and endless. Emily followed me out, clutching a glass of champagne. "He talks about you," she said. "He just doesn't know how to explain you to people." I turned to her. "He doesn't need to explain me. I built my own explanation, brick by brick." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. When I came back inside, I heard one of the Vaughn's friends whisper, "Which one's the father again?" Another voice answered, "The one who looks like he fixed the wiring." They laughed softly. Alex pretended not to hear. I pretended not to care. On the drive home, headlights streaked across the windshield, like ghosts of choices past. I couldn't stop thinking about how my son looked when he laughed at their jokes, polite, practiced, not proud. That was the moment I realized we weren't living in the same story anymore. He was writing a version of his life where I was a background character, the humble origin he could mention in interviews, but never invite to the table. I told myself to let it go, to be the bigger man. But every time I saw one of his posts about success and growth, something inside me tightened. Not anger, not jealousy, just a quiet sadness, the kind that comes from watching someone forget the language you taught them. Then one day my phone rang. "Mr. Reed," the voice said, "this is Julia Harper from Oak Ridge Resort. I wanted to confirm the energy audit for next quarter." I froze. Oak Ridge Resort, the Vaughn property, the wedding venue. I smiled into the receiver. "Of course, Julia. We'll make sure everything's running perfectly." After we hung up, I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The divide between me and my son had grown wider than ever. But for the first time, I wasn't sad about it. I was calculating. Because if life had taught me anything, it was that bridges can burn. But sometimes the man who built them still controls the power lines. It's strange how success can build walls higher than any roof I've ever installed. But walls can crack, and when they do, the light finds its way in. They called it a rehearsal dinner, but to me it felt like an inspection. The Vaughn estate glowed under 100 golden lights, strung between palm trees. A jazz band played near the pool waiters, and black vests floated by with trays of champagne, and laughter drifted like perfume. I parked my old Ford next to a row of imported cars and looked down at my clothes. Navy shirt, khaki pants, the same boots I wore to work that morning. My hands were clean, but they still carried the memory of wire dust and steel. I stepped out, straightened my collar, and told myself, "It's just dinner." Inside, the air smelled like wealth, fresh flowers, polished wood money old enough to have a scent. Emily spotted me first, her smile polite but stiff. "Mr. Reed, you made it?" She placed a hand on my arm, steering me toward the dining room. "Everyone's so excited to meet you." That was a lie, but I appreciated the effort. Alex stood near the bar wearing a charcoal suit that made him look more like a politician than a son. When our eyes met, I caught something hesitation, maybe embarrassment, before he covered it with a smile. "Hey, Dad. Glad you came." The tone was casual, but his fingers fidgeted with his cufflinks. "Of course," I said. "Wouldn't miss it." Mrs. Vaughn approached like a queen greeting a farmer. Perfect hair, flawless pearls, the kind of woman who measured worth in golf club memberships. "Alex's father," she said, her smile brittle. "How lovely to finally meet you." She offered a handshake that lasted exactly one polite second. We were just talking about how wonderful it is when families come together for such important occasions. The word important lingered in the air like smoke. Dinner was set in a long glass room overlooking the ocean. The tables shimmered with silverware and crystal name cards written in calligraphy. Mine was placed at the far end between a junior associate from Brightwave and a florist who looked like she wished she were anywhere else. As I sat down, I could feel the glances measuring, comparing, categorizing. Conversations sparkled around me, full of deals and destinations. Someone was discussing hedge funds. Another bragged about ski resorts in Switzerland. I cut my steak slowly, wondering how many of them had ever changed a tire. The man beside me leaned over. "So, Mr. Reed, what line of work are you in?" "Energy," I said. "Solar systems." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you install them? I build them. Ah, hands-on guy, huh? That's rare these days." He chuckled, sipping his wine. The table laughed politely. Alex spoke up before I could. "Dad's always been more of a doer than a talker." The laughter grew a little louder. Emily touched his arm gently, silent enough, but the damage was done. I smiled, pretending it didn't matter. I'd been laughed at before by bosses, by bankers, even by fate itself. But never by my own blood. When the waiter poured more wine, I glanced at the glass. The reflection of the chandelier shimmered in the red liquid, fractured and trembling. It reminded me of something Laura used to say. "Never raise your voice, Mike. Raise your worth." I gripped the stem until my hand steadied. As the meal went on, Mrs. Vaughn leaned in from across the table. "Alex tells us you've been in the solar field for quite some time," she said, her tone dripping with curiosity, disguised as courtesy. "That's wonderful. We're all for renewable energy, though. Of course, it's not exactly glamorous." Her friends tittered. Alex laughed, too nervously. I lifted my glass and met her gaze. "You're right, ma'am," I said. "It's not glamorous, but it keeps your lights on." The laughter stopped. For a heartbeat, all you could hear was the surf outside. Mrs. Vaughn blinked, forced another smile, and changed the subject. I went back to my meal. Later, as everyone mingled by the pool, I stepped out onto the terrace for some air. The night sky hung low over the ocean's stars, scattered like distant sparks. I heard footsteps behind me. It was Julia Harper, the wedding planner. She was holding a clipboard and looking out at the water. "Beautiful place," she said. "It is," I answered. "You've done a fine job." She smiled faintly. "I didn't know you were the groom's father until tonight." "Let's keep that between us," I said quietly. "For now." She hesitated. "You don't deserve the way they treated you in there." I looked at her steady. "It's fine, Julia. People reveal themselves eventually. My job's just to make sure the lights stay on long enough for them to see it." She studied me for a moment, nodded, and walked away. Back inside, the jazz band had shifted to slow music. Couples danced under the glow of chandeliers. I watched Alex twirl Emily, both of them radiant and young, and certain the world would always applaud them. For a moment, I envied their ignorance. Then Alex caught me watching. He came over, his smile tight. "Dad, maybe next time you could wear a blazer or something." "People notice." "They noticed plenty tonight," I said. His expression hardened. "Look, I'm just trying to make sure everything goes smoothly tomorrow." "Of course," I replied, my voice calm. "Wouldn't want to cause a power outage." He frowned, not catching the joke or the warning. When the dinner ended, I shook hands, thanked the hosts, and walked back to my truck. The valet hesitated before giving me the keys, like he wasn't sure I belonged to one of those vehicles. I drove off without looking back. The estate lights faded behind me until only the road remained dark and endless. Halfway home, I pulled over and opened my phone. The wedding itinerary sat in my inbox, sent by Julia earlier that evening. I scrolled through it: vendors' schedules, bank transfers, each one neatly tied to a system I already knew by heart. The florist used our solar grids for her greenhouses. The caterer leased his kitchen from one of our commercial properties. Even the resort's energy line ran through a subsidiary of Reed Renewables. All of it humming quietly beneath their polished surface, powered by a man who apparently wasn't important enough. I smiled, slow and deliberate. Revenge wasn't about rage, it was about rhythm. And tonight, I'd found the beat. They thought silence meant surrender, I murmured, as I put the truck in gear. But in the hands of a builder, silence is just the sound before construction begins. The night was quiet, but my phone wasn't. I was sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of cold coffee in my hand, papers spread out in front of me, contract drafts, invoices, designs for an upcoming solar project in Nevada. The clock on the wall read 12:47 a.m. when the phone buzzed. "Alex," the screen said. For a second, I thought about letting it ring out, but instinct made me answer. "Hey, son," I said, trying to sound casual. There was a pause, the kind that tells you something's wrong before a word is spoken. His voice came through quiet, heavy. "Dad, I need to talk to you about the wedding." I leaned back in the chair. "What about it?" "It's just, Emily and I were thinking maybe it's better if you skip the ceremony. You can come to the reception after." The words didn't register at first. "Skip the ceremony? Yeah," he said quickly, like ripping off a bandage. "It's not personal. It is just there's going to be a lot of people there from her father's company, from Brightwave. You wouldn't feel comfortable. It's formal, and you know optics matter." Optics. I almost laughed. That was a word for glass, not people. "I see," I said, even though I didn't. "So I'd make you uncomfortable." He sighed. "Dad, please don't take it that way. You know how much I love you. I just don't want you to be judged by people who don't understand." I stared at the wall, where a single photo of his mother still hung Laura in her old denim jacket, laughing into the camera. I could almost hear her whisper, "Don't shout, Mike. Let them tell you who they are." "I understand," I said finally. "Good. I knew you would. You always said you wanted what's best for me, right?" "I did." "Then this is it. Just one day, Dad. I'll make it up to you." I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see. "Sure thing, son." He sounded relieved. "Thanks, Dad. You're the best. Good night, Alex." When the line went dead, I sat in silence. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car passed by, its headlights brushing across the window before fading. I stared at my hands, scarred steady, and then at the phone lying beside them. I opened the recorder app, hit new file, and spoke softly into the microphone. "Proof 1, I said. 12:56 a.m. Conversation with my son. My voice didn't tremble. It was too tired for that. I saved the file. Then I got up, poured out the coffee, and stood at the sink for a long time. The reflection in the glass showed an older man who had given his son everything except the one thing he clearly needed most: humility. When I sat back down, the notebook was still open. Across the top of the page were the words I'd written after the rehearsal dinner, Phase 1. Make them see what important really means. I picked up my pen and started writing underneath it. Phase 2. Control the current. I opened my laptop, the glow washing over the kitchen. One by one, I typed names: Julia Harper, Patricia Wells, James Rodriguez. Each vendor, each connection tied somehow to my world of circuits and contracts. Every one of them powered by something I built. The first call went out at 1:15 a.m. "Julia." "It's Michael Reed," I said when she answered, groggy but alert. "I need to see you first thing tomorrow." "Oak Ridge Resort, 10 a.m. "Michael," she said. "It's almost 2 in the morning. I know. But this can't wait. Bring your full vendor list. Her voice softened. Are you okay? I'm fine, I said. I'm just turning off a few switches. After I hung up, I called Richard Hayes, the regional director at First National. He'd handled my accounts since I started the company. Richard, I said I need a freeze on transaction number 2411 under Vaughn Wedding Services. Mark it as vendor restructuring. There was a pause. Everything all right, mister? Reed. Everything's perfect, I said. Just keeping the lights balanced. He chuckled, used to my metaphors. Consider it done. By the time the sun began to rise, I'd sent 4 emails and made 3 calls. I leaned back in my chair, exhausted but clear-headed. Revenge wasn't born from anger. It was born from precision. I didn't want to hurt my son. I wanted him to see. At 6 a.m., I stepped outside. The morning was cool, the sky painted in streaks of orange and gold. My truck was covered in dew. I ran my fingers across the hood, the metal cold and solid. I'd driven that thing for 25 years, through storms, through job sites, through everything life threw at me. It never quit. Neither did I. Inside, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, opened a drawer, and pulled out a photo I hadn't looked at in years. Laura holding a baby, Alex, both of them smiling at something just outside the frame. I promised you I'd raise him, right? I whispered. Guess I still have work to do. I sat down again and started sketching a flowchart on the back of an invoice. Not electrical this time, but human people money perception control. My whole career had been about directing energy, sending current where it needed to go. This wasn't any different. I marked the final box with one line. Execute with silence. At 8:00, Julia texted back. Understood, meeting confirmed. I smiled faintly. Everything was already in motion. Before heading out, I packed a folder with a few old documents, investment summaries, property shares, vendor contracts, the kind of proof no one ever looked for until it was too late. I placed them in my briefcase next to the digital recorder. As I locked the front door, the morning light caught the small metal plaque I'd installed on the porch years ago. It said Reed Electric Solutions, built on trust. I ran my hand over the letters. Funny how trust and electricity work the same way, you only noticed when it was gone. Driving toward the city, I rolled the windows down and let the wind fill the cab. The radio played some old Springsteen song about fathers and sons. I didn't turn it off. The lyrics hit differently now. Alex thought I wouldn't fit in his world. He was right. I didn't belong there. I built my own. Power doesn't come from the spotlight. It comes from the switch you control in the dark. And tomorrow, I'd remind him who built the grid. Some men start their mornings with prayer. I start mine with a plan. By 6:30, the blueprint was spread across my workbench, the same table where I'd drawn solar schematics, now covered with names and numbers instead of wires and wattage. Every arrow, every line, connected to a piece of my son's wedding, the florist, the caterer, the venue, the lighting crew. I traced each one like a circuit, studying how the current of money and power flowed through them. It was almost poetic. The sun was just climbing over Riverside when I dialed the first number. Julie, I said as soon as she answered. We'll meet at Oak Ridge Resort in 2 hours. Don't bring anyone else. Her voice was cautious. What's this about, Michael? Just a small change of plans, I said. She hesitated, then sighed. I'll be there. I ended the call and poured myself a cup of black coffee. My hand trembled only slightly when I lifted it. Not from fear anticipation. There's a rhythm to revenge, a quiet music that plays beneath every decision. I could hear it now, humming in the background, like the low buzz of a transformer. At 8:45, I parked outside the resort. The Oak Ridge property stretched across 50 acres of manicured perfection, marble fountains, white gazebos, and glass pavilions that caught the sunlight like prisms. The Vaughns loved it, because it screamed prestige. What they didn't know was that half the resort's power grid and its solar infrastructure belonged to a company I'd built 10 years ago. Their lights were literally mine. Julia arrived 5 minutes later, clipboard in hand, wearing that crisp professional calm only people used to chaos possess. "Michael," she greeted, "I hope you're not about to cancel on me. This wedding is running on a minute-by-minute schedule." "Not cancel," I said, smiling faintly. "Adjust." She followed me to the terrace overlooking the main event space. The decorators were already setting up rows of orchids tables covered in ivory linen, the smell of fresh-cut roses thick in the air. "Beautiful," I said, almost ashamed to waste it. Julia frowned. "You're scaring me." I turned to her. "You remember the Solar Expo in San Francisco? You told me then that I saved your business." Her eyes widened a little. "You gave me that loan. I never forgot." "I'm calling it in," I said softly. "Tomorrow when I say 6 words to you, you'll know what to do. Every vendor, every service stop immediately. No food, no flowers, no lights." She blinked, speechless. "You're serious?" "Very. Michael, this could ruin me." "It won't. I'll cover every cost, every penny." I met her eyes. "This isn't about money. It's about respect." She exhaled slowly, reading something in my expression that made her straighten her shoulders. "What are the 6 words?" I smiled. "Let's proceed with the alternate arrangement." She repeated it under her breath, as if testing the weight of them. "That's all. That's all." By 10, she was gone, leaving me alone with the sound of hammering and laughter. The decorators had no idea that tomorrow's perfect scene would never happen. Back in my truck, I opened my laptop and logged into the Reed Holdings system. My name might not have been on every document, but my fingerprints were. Under Oak Ridge Energy Supply. Contract, I typed a short memo. Scheduled maintenance window, May 14th, 3 p.m. Temporary disconnection authorized by Emmy Reed. Just like that, the ballroom's power grid became part of my plan. The next call was to Richard Hayes at First National. "Richard," I said, "do me a favor. Put a soft hold on the Von Wang wedding vendor account." "Nothing official, just a flag." He chuckled. "Trouble in paradise." "You could say that. Consider it done, Michael. You've earned enough credit to shut down half the city if you wanted." "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," I said, smiling to myself. I spent the afternoon visiting 2 old friends, men who still ran crews for me in Riverside. Eddie, my foreman, and Carlos, one of my oldest electricians. We met behind the warehouse over coffee from a paper cup. "I might need a couple of trucks this weekend," I told them. Eddie raised an eyebrow. "Wedding work, something like that. Nothing illegal, just symbolic." Carlos grinned. "You want it done quiet as always," I said. "No noise, no mess. Just timing." They didn't ask questions. After all these years, they trusted me. By dusk, I drove back home. The house felt still, almost reverent, like it knew what I was about to do. I took out an old cigar box from the cabinet and laid it open on the table. Inside were relics of a life built one wire at a time: Laura's wedding ring, Alex's first report card, the original key to my first office, and a faded photo of a half-finished solar farm under a blazing sun. I picked it up, traced the edge with my thumb. "You wanted him to be better than me," I murmured. "Guess we just have different definitions of better." The phone rang. Julia again. "Michael," she said, "I've reviewed the list. If we do this, there's no going back." "I know. Then I'll be ready." I hung up and went to the window. Across the street, my neighbor's porch light flickered. One quick adjustment to the voltage could fix it, but I let it blink. Not every light deserves saving. When the sky turned dark, I sat at my desk and wrote one final note in my ledger, Phase 3, Education Day. The word education looked strange in my handwriting, But that's what this was, an education in humility, not vengeance. Before turning in, I checked my email one last time. A new message from Julia had arrived. Subject line: alternate arrangement confirmed. No body text, just 6 words typed neatly at the bottom. When you whisper, I'll listen. I closed the laptop and leaned back. The house hummed softly around me, powered by the same quiet system that had kept everything running for decades. Tomorrow the world would see what happens when you forget who keeps the current flowing. Tomorrow my son would learn that power doesn't live in the spotlight, it lives in the switch. They said the day would be perfect. They were half right. By 10 that morning, Oak Ridge Resort was a postcard come to life. White chairs lined the garden aisle in perfect symmetry, glass lanterns caught the early sun, and the ocean behind the altar shimmered like liquid silver. Guests in tailored suits and pastel dresses sipped mimosas, greeting each other with air kisses and the subtle arrogance that comes from knowing your name's on the right list. From the parking lot, I watched through the open gate. My old Ford looked out of place among the Bentleys and black SUVs. I didn't care. I stepped out, dusted off my jacket, and adjusted the small black folder tucked under my arm. Inside it was a copy of every contract, every payment receipt, every strand of thread holding this wedding together. I could have worn a tux. I could have played the part, but a man doesn't need costume jewelry to prove his worth. I walked toward the main hall, my boots tapping against marble that my company's lights powered from below. Julia stood near the entrance, clipboard in hand, tense as a soldier before battle. When our eyes met, she gave a small nod. "Everything's ready," she said softly. "Good," I replied. "Let's keep it quiet until it's time." Across the courtyard, the Vaughn family was posing for photos. Emily's mother adjusted her pearls, while the photographer directed everyone into place. Alex stood at the edge of the group, smiling for the camera, laughing easily, every inch the man he wanted to be. He hadn't noticed me yet. I slipped inside the ballroom. The space looked like a dream, crystal chandeliers, floral arches, and a string quartet rehearsing softly in the corner. I took a seat in the back row and waited. The ceremony was set to begin at noon. By 11:45, the place was packed. Waiters refilled glasses. The pianist shifted into a slower melody. The chatter dimmed as the officiant took his place. That was when Alex finally saw me. He froze mid-conversation. His jaw tightened. Emily followed his gaze and frowned. Then he walked over, his smile brittle. "Dad," he said quietly. "You weren't supposed to be here, I remember," I said. "But I wanted to see the view." "Please," he hissed, glancing around. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." I looked past him toward the altar. "It's beautiful," I said. "Almost as bright as the house lights." He blinked. "What nothing?" I smiled faintly. "I'll stay out of the way." Before he could answer, the wedding coordinator waved for him to take his place. I watched him walk back up the aisle, adjusting his tie, whispering something to Emily that made her laugh nervously. The music swelled, the guests rose, and for a moment the air smelled like roses and expensive champagne. Julia appeared at my shoulder. "Are you sure?" she whispered. I nodded once. "Now." I stood, walked calmly down the side aisle until I reached her, leaned in close enough for only her to hear, and whispered 6 words. "Let's proceed with the alternate arrangement." Her breath caught, but she didn't hesitate. She lifted her phone, typed a single message, and sent it to every vendor on site. Then she gave me one small, steady look, the kind of look that meant a fuse had just been lit. It began quietly. The string quartet's music stopped mid-note. Guests turned their heads confused. Then the lights dimmed and flickered. The air conditioning shut off with a soft sigh. In the distance, I heard the clatter of kitchen doors swinging open as catering staff hurriedly packed up trays. Emily's mother gasped. "What's happening?" Julia stepped forward smoothly. "Just a change in arrangements, ma'am." Within minutes, the sound system went dead. The floral staff started removing the centerpieces, whispering apologies. The photographer unhooked his camera and left. A waiter carrying a tray of champagne flutes turned around and vanished into the hallway. "Is this some kind of joke?" Emily cried. Alex stormed toward Julia. "What are you doing? Who told you to stop?" Julia looked at me. He did. The guests' murmurs grew into a confused hum. I stepped forward slowly, my voice calm. I asked them to pause. Weddings this expensive should come with an off switch. Alex stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "You're ruining everything." "No," I said quietly. "I'm fixing something." "Fixing, Dad, you've lost it." I raised my hand, cutting him off. "You told me I wasn't important enough to be here. I figured I'd take everything else that wasn't important too." He looked around the room, dark, empty, unraveling. "You can't do this." "Actually, I can," I said. "And I already did." Emily's father stepped forward, his face red. "Mr. Reed, this is outrageous. Do you realize what this costs?" "I do," I said. "About $200,000. Don't worry, I paid for it." That stopped him cold. The room went silent. Alex shook his head, his voice cracking. "What are you talking about?" "The venue," I said. "The catering, the flowers, the lighting. Every vendor here works through contracts that pass through my companies. Reed Holdings owns 30% of this resort's energy grid. When I said the lights were mine, I meant it." Someone in the crowd whispered, "Wait, Reed Holdings, he's that Reed." The name rippled through the guests like electricity. The silence turned heavy electric. Alex's voice dropped. You're bluffing. Ask your planner," I said, nodding toward Julia. She lifted her clipboard. "It's true," she said quietly. "Every account, every service, it all runs through Reed Renewables." Emily covered her mouth. Mrs. Vaughn swayed, clutching her pearls. I took a step closer to my son. "You thought I'd embarrass you, Alex? You didn't realize how much of your world depends on mine." He swallowed hard. "Why?" he whispered. "Because you needed to see what happens when you forget who built the ground you stand on." The guests shifted, whispering, filming. Phones lit up like tiny stars. Someone murmured, "He's teaching him a lesson." Alex's voice rose. "You could have talked to me like a normal person." I smiled faintly. Normal conversations don't make people remember. I turned to the guests. "Forgive the interruption, everyone. There's been a change in power, literally and otherwise." No one laughed. Then I looked back at my son. "You said I wasn't important enough to attend your wedding. But tell me, son, how's a wedding supposed to happen without power?" The question hung in the air like a low hum before the lights flickered out completely. Darkness fell thick and absolute. The only glow came from the open doors behind me, sunlight pouring in across the marble. I started walking toward it, the sound of my boots echoing through the silence. Julia's voice followed softly behind me. 6 words. That's all it took. Outside, the breeze off the ocean felt cleaner, lighter. I glanced back once at the darkened ballroom. The guests murmuring, the chandeliers swinging gently in the heat. Then I turned away. He'd called me unimportant. Now he knew what the world looked like when I wasn't there to keep it running. Chaos doesn't always begin with shouting. Sometimes it starts with silence. 10 minutes after I walked out of the ballroom, the entire resort was unraveling in slow motion. The string quartet had stopped playing. The chandeliers hung dark and useless above 200 guests who suddenly didn't know what to do with themselves. Laughter turned to whispers, then confusion, then panic. I could hear the sound of heels on marble and the rising hum of expensive irritation. From the terrace, I watched it all unfold through the glass doors. The Vaughns were barking orders at staff who had already left. Emily stood frozen near the altar, her bouquet wilting in the sun. And my son, my boy, who thought the world bent for him, was pacing like a caged animal, his phone glued to his ear, demanding someone fix it. He didn't know I'd already made sure no one could. Julia appeared beside me, clipboard pressed to her chest. "It's done," she said quietly. "Every vendor's pulled out. Catering's gone. The florist redirected their delivery to the children's hospital like you asked." I nodded. "Good. Let's make sure everyone's paid in full." She hesitated. "You really don't want to watch the rest? I've seen enough," I said. "They'll get the message." Inside, Mrs. Vaughn was losing her composure. "This is unacceptable. We paid for perfection." I could almost hear Julia's voice in my head repeating what I'd told her that morning. "There's no refund on lessons." Guests began leaving in clusters, murmuring into their phones, recording videos, snapping photos. It wouldn't take long for someone to upload it all. I didn't plan for that part, but I knew it was coming. These people lived for gossip, for spectacle. They'd turn their own humiliation into entertainment before the day was over. By the time I reached the parking lot, the first video had already gone online. I watched it play on my phone, 30 seconds long. Shaky footage of a dark ballroom and a panicked groom yelling at staff. The caption read, "When the lights go out at a 200K wedding." It took exactly 3 hours for the clip to go viral. While the internet dissected every frame, I drove home calm as a man who'd finished a long job. I brewed coffee, turned on the local news, and waited. At 5 o'clock, the anchor's voice came through the screen. "Breaking story out of Newport Beach: technical failures caused chaos at a high-profile wedding between the Vaughn and Reed families. Sources say the event abruptly ended after a full system shutdown." The shot cut to a reporter standing outside the resort gates interviewing guests. "1 minute everything was perfect," a woman said, fanning herself. Then the lights went out and the staff disappeared. It was surreal. Another guest added. "Someone said the groom's father had something to do with it. The man just walked out, calm as can be. Weirdest thing I've ever seen." I took a sip of coffee and smiled. They always underestimate calm men. An hour later, Julia called. "Michael, you need to check social media." I opened my laptop. Twitter, excuse me, X, was already burning. Hashtags spread like wildfire. Hashtag power of respect. Wedding blackout. Reed Vaughn. Someone had posted a clip of me leaving the ballroom, sunlight pouring around me, while guests sat in darkness. The caption said, "When the real power walks out of the room." It had 2 million views by sunset. Then came the comment section. "This is the most satisfying thing I've seen all year. He's a legend." The father flipped the switch on entitlement. Respect, money. For once, the internet got it right. At 7:30 p.m., a familiar voice appeared on the news again. "Alex." The reporter cornered him outside the Vaughn estate. He looked exhausted, eyes red, tie undone. "Mr. Reed," she asked, "do you have any comment about what happened today?" He swallowed hard. "It was a technical failure," he said stiffly. "Nothing more." The reporter pressed. "Is it true your father was involved?" Alex hesitated just long enough to make the silence answer for him. "No comment," he muttered before walking away. The clip ended. But 20 minutes later, someone else uploaded the footage from another angle, the one that captured our brief argument before I left. "You said I wasn't important enough. You can't do this." "Actually, I can." 7 words that turned a private humiliation into public theater. By midnight, every news outlet had picked it up. The headlines varied, but the tone was the same. Billionaire energy founder sabotages son's 200K wedding after not important enough. Comment. Billionaire. They loved that word. Made it sound like revenge was a rich man's game. It wasn't. It was a father's. The calls started around 1 in the morning. Old business partners, journalists, acquaintances from decades ago. Some congratulated me, some scolded me. I answered none of them. At 2, my phone buzzed again. Julia. "You've seen it all?" she asked. "Every bit. You know they'll paint you as ruthless." "I've been called worse," I said. She laughed softly. "You did it with precision, Michael. I've never seen anything like it." "It's not precision," I said. "It's patience." When dawn broke, I went outside and stood on the porch, watching the neighborhood come to life. My neighbors waved same as always. The world didn't end because one spoiled boy lost a wedding. If anything, it started to make sense again. Still, a part of me ached. Revenge, no matter how clean, leaves a bruise. Later that morning, my assistant Sarah called. "The press wants a statement. Should I draft something? I thought about it." "Just one line," I said. "Tell them I don't comment on family matters. But make sure they spell my company's name right." That afternoon, the final twist came. Someone leaked the recording Alex's late-night call from the week before. His drunken voice slurred and arrogant, saying I should stay in the background so he could climb higher. The internet ate it alive. He told his dad to hide. He deserved it. Never mess with the man who built your world. By evening, Brightwave Communications announced Alex's temporary leave of absence. The Vaughn family issued a bland statement about unforeseen complications. And I sat in my kitchen watching it all unfold with the same quiet composure I'd had when I flipped that invisible switch. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting long orange light across my table. I reached over, turned off the lamp, and sat in the glow of what I'd built, the kind of light that didn't depend on approval or apology. For 25 years, I kept the lights on for everyone else. Now, for once, I'd turned them off to make someone finally see. By the time I drove back to Oak Ridge the next morning, the world already knew. The news vans were parked along the entrance road, their antennas stabbing at the gray sky. Reporters huddled under umbrellas, microphones ready. Guests from the night before were still trickling in to pick up lost purses, jackets, and pride. I rolled past them slowly, window down, letting the noise fade behind me. Inside the truck, the only sound was the quiet rhythm of the engine, steady, patient, unbothered. Julia was waiting near the resort's main doors, her clipboard gone, replaced by a folded newspaper. She handed it to me without a word. The headline took up half the page. Energy tycoon shuts down son's $200,000 wedding in powerful lesson. Below it, a photo of me walking out of the ballroom, sunlight slicing across the marble floor. "They're calling you the man who pulled the plug," she said. I smiled faintly. Catchy. "They want a quote. They already got one," I said. "They just don't understand it yet." Inside, the ballroom was half cleaned. The flowers were gone, the tables bare. Only the faint echo of yesterday's chaos lingered in the air. Alex stood near the stage, sleeves rolled up, talking to a man in a suit I recognized immediately. Bill Patterson, the senior partner from Brightwave. I'd met him years ago when his company had signed a contract for our solar conversion projects. Back then, he was sharp, ambitious, and smarter than most. He looked tired now. When Alex saw me, his face went pale. "Dad," he said, his voice low, "you shouldn't be here." "Maybe not," I said, "but I own a third of the electricity running through this building, so I'd say it's fair." Patterson turned around, blinking in disbelief. "You're Michael Reed, the Reed." "From Reed Renewables," I nodded. "That's me." His expression shifted from surprise to discomfort. "Well, this is awkward. I imagine it is." Alex looked between us, confused. "You two know each other." "Your father," Patterson said slowly, "is the reason half our contracts even exist." Alex froze. "What?" I stepped closer, calm and deliberate. For the past 8 years, Brightwave's solar integration projects, your projects were subcontracted through my companies. Every watt of power that lights up your offices runs on panels I built. You've been taking my money and calling it progress. Alex's mouth opened, but no words came out. Patterson cleared his throat. Michael, I had no idea this was a family matter. It wasn't, I said. Until my son decided family didn't matter. The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. Finally, Patterson straightened his tie. I'll let you two talk. And Alex, consider this your notice. The board voted this morning. Effective immediately, you're suspended pending review. Clients don't like drama. He left before my son could respond. The door clicked shut, and the sound felt final. Alex sank into one of the empty chairs. You ruined me, he whispered. No, I said quietly. I revealed you. He looked up, eyes red. I worked for everything I had. You had no right, I cut him off. You worked in a world I built for you. I gave you every advantage, every chance to rise. And when you did, you looked down. He stood shaking his head. You think humiliating me makes you right? I don't care about being right. I care about what's real. You said I wasn't important enough to be at your wedding. I wanted you to see what that word means. He laughed bitterly. Congratulations. You made your point. Not yet, I said, pulling a folder from under my arm and setting it on the nearest table. This is the paperwork for every company under Reed Holdings. The resort? The vendors, the charities, the hospitals. You've walked through half the city without realizing you were walking through my work. He flipped through the documents, his eyes scanning the signatures. M. Reed Renewables, Solar Grid, Development, Riverside Energy Trust. This can't be real, he murmured. Page 12, I said. You'll find the power contracts for Brightwave's newest campus, signed 6 months ago. You approved them. His hands shook as he read. You hid all this from me. I protected you from it. There's a difference. You were supposed to learn how to stand, not how to inherit. He looked up. You lied to me. I met his gaze evenly. I let you believe what you wanted to believe, that worth comes from a paycheck, from applause, from a last name on a business card. I hoped the world would teach you otherwise. Turns out it needed help. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The ocean murmured outside, soft and relentless. Finally, Alex's voice cracked. I didn't mean it, what I said. I know. He swallowed hard. Then why go this far? Because sometimes a lesson has to echo. His shoulders sagged. I've lost everything. You've lost nothing that matters, I said. The only thing you ever owned was your word. You still have a chance to make that mean something. He looked away, staring at the window where sunlight poured across the floor. What do I do now? Start small, I said. Apologize when you mean it. Work when no one's watching. Earn back what you took for granted. And remember, power doesn't make you important. Character does. A door opened behind us. Julia stepped in quietly. Reporters are outside, she said. They want a statement. I glanced at Alex. They're here for you, not me. He shook his head. I can't face them. Then I will. I walked past her toward the doors. The cameras turned as soon as they saw me. Flashes exploded, voices rose. Mr. Reed, did you sabotage the wedding? Was this revenge? Is it true your son was fired because of you? I stopped at the top of the steps. No, I said clearly. It wasn't revenge. It was a reminder of what someone shouted. That everything you see here, every light, every room, every dollar, was built by hands that didn't need validation to matter. My son forgot that. Maybe others have too. The reporters fell silent. I nodded once, turned, and went back inside. Alex was still sitting at the table staring at the folder. When I passed, he said quietly, "Dad?" I paused. I'm sorry." I nodded. "Good. Now make it mean something." As I walked toward the exit, the maintenance crew flipped the main breaker. The chandeliers flickered back to life, flooding the ballroom with warm light. For the first time, the brightness didn't feel artificial. I turned back one last time. Alex was standing in that glow, smaller, humbled, but maybe finally seeing clearly. For 25 years, I'd kept the lights on for everyone else. Today, I'd taught my son what it meant to deserve them. The internet doesn't forgive, but it never forgets who deserved it. By the end of that week, the story had turned into something else entirely. The headlines shifted from scandal to fable. News anchors used words like lesson justice and humility. Talk shows debated whether I was cruel or courageous. Hashtags still trended. Chachad power of respect. Father of. The year hash wedding blackout, but the anger had burned out, replaced by fascination. Alex, though, was silent. I didn't hear from him for days. I saw him once on TV, footage of him leaving the Brightwave office's jacket over his shoulder, ignoring the reporters chasing him down the steps. He looked thinner, older, not the polished executive who had laughed at me weeks before. Just a man stripped of every layer that wasn't real. I didn't take pleasure in it. There's no joy in watching your child fall, even when it's his own fault. Justice and satisfaction aren't the same thing. 2 days later, Sarah, my assistant, walked into my office holding her phone. "You might want to see this," she said. On the screen was a new post from the Vaughn family. They'd issued a statement calling off the engagement. Differences in values, they said, mutual understanding. The comments were brutal. She dodged a bullet. Maybe he'll learn to marry humility next time. I set the phone down. "Leave it," I said. Sarah hesitated. "You okay?" "I'm fine." But that wasn't true. Revenge, even righteous revenge, leaves you empty when the noise dies down. The house felt too quiet that night. I made dinner for one, ate it standing up, then turned on the news just to fill the silence. Every channel still had my face somewhere in the corner. At one point, a reporter said Michael Reed hasn't issued a single apology or public comment. Sources say he's focusing on his work at Reed Renewables, refusing interviews. They were right. I didn't owe the world a confession. What happened was between me and my son. But stories like that don't stay private. That Friday morning, I got a call from Eleanor Vanderbilt, a woman whose name carried weight in every boardroom on the coast. We'd served together on the hospital board for years, though she preferred philanthropy with photo ops. "Michael," she said, "you've become something of a folk hero." That wasn't the plan. "Of course not," she replied, amused. "But you did something most people only dream about. You taught someone a lesson they couldn't buy their way out of." My husband calls it poetic justice. I call it family business, I said. She laughed softly. "Whatever you call it, it's spreading. You've inspired a dozen op-eds about dignity and respect. Enjoy it while it lasts." The news cycle moves fast. "Good," I said. "Maybe it'll move past my family sooner." After I hung up, I looked around my office, the walls lined with photos from the company's early days, men in hard hats, sunlight bouncing off panels, grit and pride, frozen in time. Those pictures meant more to me than any headline. At noon, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Alex stood there. He looked rough eyes, hollow suit, wrinkled hands, shoved deep in his pockets. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. He walked to the kitchen, stopping by the counter where Laura's old coffee mug still sat. "You kept this? Never saw a reason to throw it away." He nodded, ran a thumb along the chipped rim. "I used to think you were stubborn." "I am," I said. He smiled faintly. "You're also right." We sat down. He didn't touch the coffee I poured him. He just stared at the steam curling up from the cup. "They fired me," he said finally. "I heard. Everyone knows. I walk into a store, people recognize me. Half of them want to shake my hand. The other half want to spit in my face. That's what happens when you turn your life into a headline." "I didn't mean for any of this, I know," I said. "But meaning doesn't erase impact." He rubbed his temples. "I don't know what to do." "Start again," I said. This time with both feet on the ground. He let out a shaky breath. "I can't believe you were behind all of it. The contracts, the companies, the power grid. How did you even keep it quiet?" "Because I didn't need anyone to know. I built it to work, not to brag." He looked at me, then really looked, and I saw recognition flicker behind the exhaustion. "I spent my life chasing approval from people who couldn't build anything," he said. "And the one person who did build something." I tried to hide. "You're not the first son to forget his father," I said gently. "But most don't get a second chance to remember him." We sat in silence. The clock ticked on the wall, steady as a heartbeat. Finally he said, "I'm sorry." I nodded. "I know." He hesitated. "Do you forgive me?" "I already did," I said. "The moment you called me unimportant, I knew I had two choices: stay hurt or teach. I chose the one that would last." He laughed softly, no bitterness in it. "You always did prefer lessons over lectures." I smiled. "You learned that from your mother." We spent the rest of the afternoon going through old photo albums. He lingered over one picture, him at 8 years old, sitting on my shoulders, both of us covered in sawdust from building his first treehouse. "You didn't care about dirt back then," I said. "I still don't," he murmured. "Not anymore." When the sun started to set, he stood up. "Dad, if it's okay, I think I need to stay here for a while. Figure things out." "There's a room down the hall," I said. "Same one you used to sneak into when you had nightmares." He smiled. "Guess I've got a few new ones now." After he went upstairs, I walked out onto the porch. The neighborhood was quiet, the sky turning orange and gold. Across the street porch, lights flickered on one by one. My own stayed steady. For years, I'd hidden behind the simplicity of work, behind the hum of machines, and the comfort of silence. Now, for the first time, the quiet didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. Maybe revenge wasn't the point. Maybe it never was. Maybe it was just the language I needed to speak so my son could finally hear me. I looked up at the fading sky and whispered, "You were right, Laura. Sometimes to build something strong, you have to burn a few things down first." Inside, I could hear Alex moving around, opening drawers, settling in. The sound filled the house like life returning. I turned off the porch light, letting the last of the sunset take over. For 25 years, I'd kept the lights on for everyone else. Now I was finally ready to let them rest. You can rebuild a business in a month. Rebuilding trust takes longer. It had been 6 weeks since the wedding, and the house no longer felt empty. Alex had moved back in quietly, without ceremony, without pride. He slept in his old room, the one with the faded posters still taped to the wall. Every morning he came down early, made the coffee, and sat across from me at the kitchen table. No phones, no noise, just the two of us, and the sound of the percolator filling the silence. One morning he pushed a small box across the table. "I sold my car," he said. "Thought I'd start paying you back." I looked at him. "You don't owe me money. I owe you more than that." I took a sip of coffee and let the words hang there. Guilt has its own pace, you don't rush it. After breakfast, we drove out to a project site just outside Riverside. Reed Renewables had been contracted to install a new solar field for a local school district, and I'd been inspecting progress once a week. Alex came along, standing awkwardly beside me, while the crew unloaded panels from the truck. Eddie, my old foreman, whistled when he saw him. Didn't think I'd ever see Junior Reed out here getting his hands dirty. Alex smiled faintly. It's been a while. Grab a wrench, Eddie said, tossing one over. Let's see if those college hands remember how to turn something. By noon, Alex's shirt was drenched in sweat, and his palms were red. He didn't complain once. When we stopped for lunch, he sat on the tailgate chewing a sandwich, watching the panels shimmer in the sun. You ever get tired of this? He asked. I shook my head. Never. This work reminds you what effort looks like. He nodded, eyes on the horizon. You built all this from nothing. I don't even know how. Piece by piece, I said. That's the only way anything real gets built. Later that evening, back home, he knocked on my office door. He was holding an envelope. What's this? I asked. He sat down, nervous. A letter from Julia Harper. She wanted me to give it to you. I opened it carefully. Julia's handwriting was neat and measured. Michael, I've seen a lot of people lose themselves in the pursuit of appearances. What you did wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. You reminded everyone, including me, why work should mean something. Thank you for letting me be part of it. I folded the letter and set it aside. You talked to her? She called, Alex said. Wanted to know if I was okay. I told her I was learning. Good. He hesitated. Dad, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Was it worth it? All of it, the wedding, the fallout, the media circus, was it really worth proving your point? I looked at him for a long time before answering. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about showing you what I could never teach you with words. He nodded slowly. You could have just told me. I did, I said quietly. You just weren't listening yet. He leaned back, exhaling. I get it now. You weren't trying to hurt me. You were trying to make me see. That's all I ever wanted. We sat there in silence. Outside, the crickets started up and the air smelled faintly of rain. After a while, he said, You know, when Mom died, I thought you'd break. But you didn't. I did, I said. I just built something over the pieces. He smiled sadly. Guess I'm doing the same thing now. The next morning, he surprised me. I came downstairs to find him already dressed in work clothes, boots and all. Where to? I asked. Eddie said they're short a hand at the East Ridge site. I told him I'd help. You sure? He nodded. I'm tired of watching other people build things. Time I started again. He left before sunrise, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to pride. Not the kind you boast about, the quiet kind that settles behind your ribs and makes breathing easier. When he got home that evening, his clothes were caked with dust, and his hands looked like they belonged to a man again. He dropped his gloves on the counter, grinning. My back's killing me. Good sign, I said. Means you did something right. Over the next few weeks, we fell into a rhythm. He worked mornings on site, then spent afternoons helping me with foundation paperwork, reviewing grants, reading proposals for local scholarships, balancing budgets. One afternoon, he looked up from the desk and said, You give away more money than most people ever make. I don't give it away, I corrected. I return it. He tilted his head. To who? To the people who keep the world running while everyone else forgets they exist. He smiled. Guess I'm one of those now. That's the idea. By the end of summer, the gossip had faded. The world had moved on, as it always does. But inside our little house, things felt different. The air was lighter, the silence comfortable. One night, Alex and I were sitting out back watching the lights from the city flicker in the distance. He said, You ever miss it? Miss what? The big life? The suits, the galas, the recognition? You could have had all of that. I shook my head. No, I don't miss pretending. I've seen too many people confuse shine with strength. I'd rather build light than chase it. He looked down at his hands. You're right. The best things I've done lately haven't been glamorous. But they've been honest. I nodded. That's the only kind that lasts. The crickets grew louder, filling the quiet between us. Finally, he said, Dad, thank you for everything. Even the hard part. I looked at him and saw the man he'd finally become. Not perfect, not proud, just real. You're welcome, I said. You're finally starting to understand the work. He smiled. You mean the work you do, or the work I'm supposed to do? Both. We sat there until the porch light flickered on, washing us in soft yellow. The same kind of light I'd spent my life building for other people. He glanced up at it. You ever gonna fix that bulb? I smiled. Not tonight. Let it flicker a little. Reminds us where we came from. And for the first time in a long time, we both laughed. Tomorrow there would be more work to do, more lessons to build, more repairs to make. But for tonight, the house felt alive again. Revenge had built the lesson. Respect would make it last. Time doesn't heal everything. It just teaches you what was worth hurting for. 6 months after the wedding that never happened, the Reed Foundation for Education and Energy opened its first regional office. A glass building overlooking Riverside Boulevard, powered entirely by solar grids my company had installed years ago. On the front wall, the foundation's motto gleamed in bronze letters. Respect is the currency of progress. I arrived early that morning to find Alex already there, sleeves rolled up, sorting through a stack of scholarship applications. He looked up and grinned. You're late. I taught you that line, I said, setting my coffee on the desk. He laughed, shaking his head. We've got a full plate today. 2 schools, 1 hospital, and a housing project waiting for approval. Good, I said. Let's keep the lights on. He worked differently now. No suits, no polished speeches. He listened more than he talked, took notes when people spoke, remembered names. I caught glimpses of the boy he used to be, the one who handed me wrenches and thought I could fix anything. Around noon, he walked into my office, holding a letter. It's from the Vaughns, he said. They're donating to the foundation. I raised an eyebrow. Guilt money? He smiled faintly. Maybe gratitude. They said your actions made them reevaluate what their name really stands for. Interesting, I said. Took them less time than I expected. He chuckled. You still don't like them, do you? I don't dislike them. I just don't believe in people who decorate their morals with charity. Real giving doesn't come with press releases. He nodded slowly. You know, I used to think reputation was everything. Now, I think the opposite. Reputation fades, I said. Legacy doesn't. That afternoon, we visited the new solar-powered community center on the east side of town. Children played basketball outside while volunteers painted murals on the walls. A teacher stopped me near the entrance. Mr. Reed, thank you. The electricity bills here used to cripple our budget. Now we can afford new books. Don't thank me, I said, nodding toward Alex. He's the one running things now, the teacher smiled. Then you raised him right. As we walked back to the truck, Alex said quietly, I don't deserve that yet. Then earn it, I said. Every day you show up, you get closer. He stared at the building for a long moment. I think Mom would have liked this. She would have loved it, I said. She always believed light should belong to everyone. We drove home as the sun dipped low, streaking the sky with gold. Alex rolled down his window, letting the wind hit his face. You ever think about stopping? He asked. Stopping what? Working, giving, building, just resting. I smiled. You don't stop being who you are. You just shift the work to something that matters more. He nodded, thoughtful. Then, I guess I still have a lot of work to do. Back at the house, he disappeared into the office while I sat on the porch. The neighborhood looked the same, though it felt different now, alive again. A breeze carried the sound of kids riding bikes down the street. Across the way, a porch light flickered and came back to life. I smiled. Later, Alex joined me outside, holding 2 cups of coffee. It's not the best, he said, but it's hot. Then, it's perfect. He sat beside me, quiet for a moment. You know, he said softly, I still get messages online. People say what you did to me was cruel. Let them talk. They think I hate you. Do you? He looked out toward the horizon. No. I think you saved me. The crickets started up, filling the stillness between us. He took a sip, then smiled. You ever regret it? The wedding, I asked. Or teaching you the hard way, both? I leaned back, thinking. Regrets for people who don't learn. You learned. That's enough. He nodded slowly. Then maybe one day, I'll be proud of the way you taught me. You already are, I said. He smiled, eyes wet but steady. Yeah, I guess I am. We sat there a long time, watching the streetlights come on one by one. The hum of power filled the air, the sound of life carrying on. Somewhere far away, the city pulsed with energy from the systems we'd built, panels catching sunlight, batteries storing it for the night. I thought about all the lessons I'd tried to teach: patience, humility, work, respect, and realized they'd all led to this quiet moment. A son who'd fallen, learned, and come home. A father who'd finally put down his anger and found peace in the glow of what he'd built. Alex broke the silence. You ever think about writing all this down? What happened? What you learned? People wouldn't believe it. They'd read it, he said. Everyone loves a redemption story. Then maybe they should write their own, I said. That's where the truth is. He laughed softly. Always the teacher, always the builder. The stars came out slowly above the rooftops. I glanced at him and saw not the boy who'd turned his back on me, but the man who'd finally understood what mattered. If I ever have a son, he said, I'll tell him this story, every word. Don't tell him, I said. Show him. He nodded. Yeah, you're right. A quiet passed between us, comfortable, full, final. I finished my coffee and stood up. Come on, I said. Let's get inside before the mosquitoes find us. As we walked in the porch, light flickered once, then steadied. I reached for the switch, hesitated, and left it on. Inside, the hum of the house wrapped around us. Alex turned on the lamp over the dining table, the one that had flickered for years. This time it held steady. I watched the glow spill across the photos on the wall, Laura's smile, the solar farm, the foundation ribbon cutting, and I felt the weight of 25 years settle into something softer. Not pride, not sorrow, just peace. I looked at my son. You know, some people chase light their whole lives? He smiled. Yeah, I nodded. The lucky ones learn how to make it. For the first time, I realized the lesson was no longer his. It was mine too. If someone ever made you feel small, don't waste your life proving them wrong. Build something so right they can't ignore it. Because sometimes the quietest revenge is learning to live with peace.